Hey, everybody. Welcome to the wonderful world of voting here, our next unit in American government. We're going to focus on this little video here called Voting for the Voters. Learn how people vote and what kind of things you have to do to be able to vote. And you'll be doing a little project with this along with our in-class materials as well, which will be your summative grades. So to start off here, let's talk about the history of voting a little bit, okay, to be in here. So first off, the original Constitution, that document we read in class, first started top level stuff. It kind of said voting was left up to the states. Okay, so it kind of said, listen, voting's up to the states. The states can make rules they want to do and how they want to make voting kind of work, right? So whoever wants to, however state wants to do it can make the rules. So what Wisconsin would do different than Minnesota, different than Illinois, etc. Okay, so basically in every state, this is 1800s. We're talking 1810, whatever it might be. Voting was basically restricted to people who were white males over age 21. Most of them, they were Protestant, Christian, and they had own a certain amount of land. So really wasn't a lot of people, right? Over time, we start seeing these things, the idea of who can vote start to expand. First, it goes people who don't own land, right? Universal white male voting, basically, okay? Then later on, after the Civil War is done in 1870, we had the 15th Amendment passed. So essentially, this said that anyone can vote who's a male. Okay, doesn't matter what race you are, color, etc., or previous condition, that being slavery, that if you are a male, you can vote. So now we have universal male suffrage, we call it, or universal male voting. From there, 1920, another 50 years after, we add the 19th Amendment, which brings in you cannot deny the right to vote based on sex. So women can now vote. So now it's basically all people or over the age of 21 that can vote. We see a few more things change in voting as we go through the 20th century here, right? So we're in 1920, go forward to 1964. We got rid of things like poll taxes and literacy tests, all those kind of things that were keeping, especially African American people, out of the voting ranks. And our last big change in voting policy was in 1971, the 26th Amendment that said if you are 18, you can vote. And so that's kind of where this idea came in, right? So in terms of who can vote, and we start seeing our voting group expand very, very slowly, okay, over time. There's even debates in some area now about expanding voting to 16. I'm going to ask you guys how you would feel about that. We'll get into class. So, all right, let's try to look at the scope. First off, if you're going to go vote, right? And we'll talk a lot about elections, those kind of things. Where's your voting information coming from, okay? And there's a lot of different places you can get it from. You can get it from TV ads. Downside of TV ads, well, it's going to be commercials that are pretty biased for one person. You watch news channels, same kind of thing. You have a lot of bias on different news channels out there. Bias being that a newspaper or a news channel may support one candidate over another candidate. Same with your radio ads. You may see signs all over the place within our different areas, okay? You see on my back wall as well in my classroom. Yeah, that tells you their name, but doesn't tell you what they're going to do, right? You can look at other news periodicals, magazines, etc. Same thing. You learn about them, but there's still some bias to it. You can watch debates. Best way to learn about candidates is to really read them up, look at what they say they're going to do, and make that happen. A lot of times, candidates have their website. Give us a little bit here. They have a website they can go on to, read through their platform, read through what they want to do, and try to become as educated as you can. The worst part of voting is that you don't want to walk in and be like, I'm going to pick this person. This is your vote, your message, and I want to make sure that you know that you are making an informed decision, saying who you want to be in that position of power. Because this is your one opportunity, right, to explain what you think should be going on. Okay. Now, going from there, okay, so you're an informed voter. Great, good. You got your information. You figure out who you might want to vote for in this election. Now it's time to register, okay? Now, whatever state you go to, there's a different policy to register how to vote, okay? Registration just means that you are officially saying and registering with the state to say that I'm going to vote in this area, in this district. And so when you register to vote, right now we use a site, myvote.wi.gov, which is essentially just a site that and it'll come up here on my screen hopefully in a second. There it goes. Where you can look up your voter info, okay, and you register to vote. And literally click on this button that says register to vote right here. And all you're going to do is take a few pieces of information. To take name, date of birth, your address, all those ideas, and see if you are registered to vote. And then if you have moved, change your address, you update your information. So essentially what registering to vote basically tells you is that you make sure you meet the requirements to vote. So are you a U.S. citizen? Are you of the right age? And do you live in the right place where you're trying to vote? We vote in districts, right? And sometimes in big cities in wards, they call them. Basically how you break it up so that everyone's voting in the right place, what it comes down to. It also makes sure you can't vote twice, in that you're registered two different places to vote. So maybe I'm registered, maybe I have a house in, one place and a house another place. I can only register in one place to vote, and they'll check and make sure that I'm not voting twice in some areas. Also, when you register, they'll check, your forms of ID, where you live, all that kind of stuff. Wisconsin's pretty unique in that we can actually register at the polls. We can actually go on voting day and register right there. You have to have your ID, fill a paperwork out. You see the copy of the form here on my screen. And you got to be able to give some proof of where you live. So usually it's a bill or your lease or your mortgage. That way you can prove that you actually live where you live. Okay. Going from there, we got to figure out what our polling place is going to be. All right, our polling place. And that's going to be the where you vote, okay? Usually it's some kind of public building. It can be a school, village office. I voted at a fire station before. If you go to California, they vote in people's garages, okay? But usually it's some kind of public building and listed. Once again, that site we talked about, My Vote Wisconsin, you can find your polling place on there, okay? You can figure out where you are. So like if I can find you here, my top here, find my polling place. I can search by address. So let's say I put my address in. Let's say I live here. Let's say I live at school. So 105 9th Street, Prairie du Sac, Wisconsin, 53578. It'll search. And it doesn't have a thing. You know why? It's not a house. That's why, which is the downside of it, okay? But if I put a different address, so let's say I put in, let's say I just put a random address in here, my old address maybe. And I can bring in Sauk City, Wisconsin. It'll tell you, we're also sorry, it doesn't have a thing. But I say, and sometimes it'll ask you to have where different pieces are, okay, and where different stuff is. So that's kind of what it asks you to do. And so it may put those ideas in. So once again, we're looking at a different address here real quick. But as you put an address in, and if you're an address where people live, right, which is why I didn't work for school, it'll show you where everything is. I'll show you where you go vote. So I put this address in on First Street. Once again, for a reason, it doesn't like it. I don't know why it doesn't like it, but it doesn't like it. So, here it goes. There you go. All right, now it finds it. So it tells me Prairie du Sac Village Hall. It tells me where to go to vote. All those kind of ideas. In a smaller town like where we live, maybe not a big deal. But if you go to a bigger city, it can make it more difficult to vote than it tells you where to go because there may be multiple polling places in a city. And so it said, basically, a polling place have to be able for all people to go vote there. You have to be able to get into the building. Has to be all that kind of stuff. Okay. Now, on voting day, when you walk into the polling place, there are different methods to vote. Different kinds of ballots you can have. A majority of our ballots are paper ballots. A piece of paper, you mark a little ballot on it, and it kind of tells you, what you vote on, right? A lot of times you have to fill a bubble in or connect a line with a marker, wherever it might be. We also have some things called voting machines. They're actually machines with levers on them and that's why I first voted in. You walk into it, and you flip the levers down, and when you pull the lever, it records your votes on a piece of paper, and you walk out. There is also doing touch screens now, which are basically these computer touch screens. You just touch who you want to vote. A little harder for some of the older people that are out there, but different types of things how you can vote. A lot of times people use paper ballots now. That's kind of the most common version, but where we go might be a little bit different. Okay. There's also called an absentee ballot. So let's say you move away. Say you go off to college or something like that, and you still want to vote back home. And you can still do that, okay? You basically request an absentee ballot. You can do that on that myvote.wi.org, and they'll mail you a ballot, right? Maybe you're homebound. Maybe you're sick. Maybe you are having surgery done, that kind of thing. You can't make it to the polling place, right? You do that ballot ahead of time. You fill it out. You sign it. You have a witness sign that says you did your ballots. You mail that ballot in ahead of time. That's your absentee ballot. Still vote where you are. And it's, we kind of got a lot of news during the pandemic where people didn't want to go to the polling place because of COVID, all that kind of stuff. But absentee is also a method where you can vote as well if you want to. Now, going forward here a little bit, how they count these things. So a lot of times it's counted by machines. You put a little thingy in the put little ballots in, and computers all add it all up. And a lot of times that's good. Sometimes if they want to do a recount, they have to be read by hand and rechecked by person. So they have to have 3 people look at each and every one. In Florida in 2000, we had this problem where people didn't fill the ballot out right. They had something called a butterfly ballot, and they had to punch a little hole out of it, and a little hole didn't punch all the way, and so the computer didn't read them right. They had to go back through all these ballots and check them over again. It was a huge mess, right? But the thing is, they try to get the count as accurate as possible, as fast as possible, so that people can get access to that. People wondering, well, we count all these ballots. How do they know so fast? Like sometimes they'll call the poll time at 8:00, and they're always saying, "Oh, this person won by 8:05." Well, as people are leaving, they do something called exit polls. So exit polls are polling companies, news companies, whatever, will set up outside a polling place. They'll try to do a good random sample of all these different areas and ask a question. They'll be like, "Hey, sir, can I ask you a question? Who'd you vote for today?" And you can answer, you can tell them no and go away. But they ask the person who voted and try to use those numbers, okay? And it would take days otherwise. Just here's an example of a exit poll, right? These are polls from one of the last elections we did. If my computer decides to load, might be a problem. There you go. Here are the 2020 election exit polls, right? They're doing. So here's the Tuesday polls. These are the ones that came in ahead of time, right? In terms of where people were in 2020 that had Trump and Biden where they're at. So they ask these different people, who you voted for, whatever. On the day of, they kind of figure out that more people voting for Biden are able to call some of those states a little bit earlier that way. And so that's where they just kind of ask people who you voted for and why they voted for them. Otherwise, it would take days to get an answer, which is really hard because we want to have answers right away. Typically, we'll use what's called popular vote for a lot of our elections. So simple vote, whoever gets most vote wins, okay? It's used for all of our state elections, local elections, for governor, for representative, for senator, all those kind of things. Not for the president, though. The president has electoral college, something we'll cover in class and talk about. But essentially, every state gets a certain number of votes, and you divide them up by state who gets become president. It was kind of a big deal, too, when President Trump became president and President Biden, who gets the most electoral college votes. But know that in most cases, most elections, popular vote is what they're going to use. Just count the votes. Whoever gets the most votes wins. Happens in a lot of elections. So, like, for example, we have a lot of different elections that will take place, like a primary election, where you're trying to figure out who's going to be the candidate for your party. So you vote and figure out, who gets the most votes to be the person who's going to run for your party. And caucuses are very similar to that, except instead of voting, you meet and hang out talking instead. That general election is that general election that where you do your voting, actually elect somebody into office, okay? And that's kind of get that candidates in office. Now, the ones over here on the right side, my right side, are different types of votes are going to happen. One's called a proposition. So we basically propose a law. So maybe people are like, "Hey, Wisconsin, we should really legalize marijuana." Okay. Representatives in our assembly and senate are like, I don't know. They may put a proposition vote out, and basically voters will say, hey, they'll say yes or no. And as like a message to the representative saying, you should do this or not do this for that matter. Those things called a referendum. That's where the voters vote directly on a bill. So it's, for example, our school referendum is a great example of that. We did a referendum for the school to do our construction project here. All the voting members of the Stockbridge School District were able to vote on that referendum to decide if they want to raise their taxes just a little bit to help pay for the school. Other states do it for change the constitution, which we did recently in Wisconsin as well, where the entire state might vote on one thing. And so that's a referendum where all the people are voting to help make that decision. Our last thing is called a recall. And a recall vote is when we take somebody out of office. So it's happened in California back in the early 2000s. That's how Arnold Schwarzenegger became the governor of California because the governor who was there at the time, things weren't going very well. People didn't like what he was doing. They said, hey, let's get him out of office. They recalled him and elected Arnold Schwarzenegger instead. Governor Scott Walker back in 2011. He was recall election, say he wasn't doing his right job, but he stayed in office. People said, let's keep him in office instead. But, there's different states, different rules for how recalls can work. So that's kind of our overview of elections, guys. Make sure you take your notes, ready to use this. We'll be doing a project with this in class. So if you have these notes, it'll be very, very beneficial to you. Thank you for your time, your attention. I'll see you all in class. See you guys.